Despite being treated like a servant by my mother-in-law and my husband without any protection, I intended to stay by their side. However, my husband changed and became spoiled by my mother-in-law, mocking me and deceiving me. I have decided that this cannot end like this, and I have sworn to take revenge on my husband and my mother-in-law. My name is Mia. I live with my husband, and we work together. I am overwhelmed with work and daily household chores, leaving no time for myself. My mother-in-law lives nearby, but my husband doesn't help with the housework, and when I go to her house, they treat me like a servant. Today, I am taking care of my brother-in-law in the hospital since my mother-in-law called me early. Even on my day off to do it, I was previously forced to drive like a taxi driver, but now I take care of my paraplegic brother-in-law. No matter how much I felt pity for him, I promised to do it of my own free will. My brother-in-law Renán was my mother-in-law's favorite, and my husband was completely ignored. It irritated me, and I always wanted to support my husband. However, my mother-in-law's and husband's attitude changed dramatically when my brother-in-law had his accident and was confined to a wheelchair. Honestly, I wanted you to leave the house. Being disabled and unable to earn money is a shame for the family, that's what she tells him. Despite the help we received from my brother-in-law in the past, she continued to treat him like an unwanted intruder, which was extremely cruel. Moreover, my husband started mocking my brother-in-law by acting like my mother-in-law. It's disturbing to think about my brother-in-law Renán, who, besides having lost the use of his legs due to the accident, had to hear things like that. Renán was kind to my husband. However, despite this, my husband made comments that only made things worse for my brother-in-law during the visit to my brother-in-law in the hospital. My husband told Renán, "Look, Renán, when you get out of the hospital, look for another house to live in because you can leave me to take care of my mother, as you would only be a nuisance to her. After all, you have become a useless cripple." Wow, those words made me angry and I ended up arguing with my husband. I explained to him that my brother-in-law had done a lot for us in the past and that his current situation was simply the result of an unfortunate accident, so we shouldn't use such words with Renán, who has always treated my husband differently than my mother-in-law. I also explained how Sandra treated me all this time, being verbally abused and forced to work as a driver on my days off. However, even while pleading, my husband didn't understand that due to my brother-in-law's accident, my mother-in-law's treatment changed completely. Now she prioritized him. While I understood, to a certain extent, my husband's feelings as a son towards me, this sudden and extreme change in attitude was terrible. He never had a commendable personality, but I never expected my husband to change so drastically. The sudden change in my husband's attitude was both shocking and sad. One day my husband suggested a family trip to Hawaii, thinking it would be nice to have some fun and break the routine. We were very excited about the idea, but I started to worry about my brother-in-law, who wouldn't be able to go to Hawaii due to his condition. I shared my concerns and learned that a caregiver would be hired to stay with my brother-in-law during the trip. However, I couldn't help but feel pity for him and wondered if we could truly enjoy the trip. A few days later, while still, I was trying to understand the words of my husband Renán. He called me, found out about the trip, and told me not to worry about him, that he would be fine. He wanted me to relax and enjoy. I jokingly replied that traveling with those two would probably. It would be more exhausting than usual, and my brother-in-law laughed, encouraged by Renán's words. I told everyone that it would be good for us to go on vacation, and I started the preparations for the trip to Hawaii. However, it fell to me to take care of the itinerary and contact the travel agency while my mother-in-law informed me of her hotel choices and itinerary preferences. Her preferences changed constantly. So I had to adjust the plans over and over again, and finally, 2 weeks before the departure, the plans for Hawaii were finalized. The 2 weeks before the departure were very hectic as I helped with hospital visits and my brother-in-law's travel arrangements. They informed me that I should stay and take care of him. I was surprised and resentful of those words. Hiring a caregiver costs money, but they expected it to be done for free. My husband and my mother-in-law laughed as they went to the airport without me, and I was stuck in that place after unpacking my things at home. I went to my mother-in-law's house using the spare key to get in and I told my brother-in-law what had just happened while I was lying in the living room. "I'm sorry for suggesting the trip, but I never expected it to end like this." Renán apologized and said that this outcome was the best from the beginning, so he would take a break from his presence. I didn't expect much from my mother-in-law, but this incident also revealed the true nature of my husband. I didn't know how to express my feelings, but I reached a point where I no longer cared. Looking down, I saw Renán's legs and left hand motionless, but in the next moment, his body, which had been lying down, lifted up. Surprised, I shouted and asked him how he managed to get up. My brother-in-law explained to me that although he had an accident, he was not permanently paralyzed. He had been wanting to free himself from my mother-in-law's excessive interference for a while. He stayed with the family because they convinced him to continue living with them instead of living alone, and he can barely manage the expenses, he can't afford to live alone. At the time of the accident, Renán said he was thinking about how to get rid of his mother without causing any problems. The turning point came when he lied and said he was paralyzed and couldn't walk. That's when my mother-in-law's attitude changed. Sandra started to like my husband. What a horrible attitude to stop loving his son just because he became paraplegic. My brother-in-law looked me in the eyes and proposed. We are going to fight against them. What do you think? I want revenge. Do you want to join me? I didn't intend to let things end this way. This incident really opened my eyes about my husband and my mother-in-law. So I accepted my brother-in-law's invitation a week after Sandra and my husband returned from Hawaii. As soon as they got home, my husband called me. Hey, where are my things? The apartment was empty. When I returned, I told him that I had sent his things to his mother's house so that he could now live with her. As I had always wanted, I completed this by telling him that I wanted a divorce. This is very selfish. You want a divorce? What happened to you? Suddenly, what do you want? Now he got angry. I finally started to argue irrationally with my husband. I confronted him, telling him that he had betrayed my trust and how much I had suffered because of him. Moreover, during the moving preparations, I discovered that she was secretly giving money to Sandra while hiding it from me. Looking back, my mother-in-law's extravagant purchases continued even after my brother-in-law quit his job. I always assumed it was Renán who was financing these things, but it turned out he significantly reduced his spending after leaving his job. This meant that Sandra must have been receiving money from someone who wasn't my brother-in-law, and the only possible person was my husband. I told him I found out he was covering his mother's extravagances while we were struggling at home, and he contradicted me with silly and confusing excuses. But I believed everything I said was true, and he couldn't come up with a valid excuse. I told him that Renán had already moved out and that I was living in a new place too. I also made it clear that neither Renán nor I had any intention of dealing with him and Sandra. So it would be better for you to live in your house after all, your family is just your mother, right? I said that and was about to hang up the phone when I heard my husband's angry voice. You really are a shameless woman. I should have divorced you much earlier. I will be much happier living with my mother, he shouted into the phone. Even in such a situation, I would talk about his mother. Thank you for the divorce request that I received from my husband. I sent the divorce papers, resolved the financial issues, and finally felt free. However, that was just the beginning. My ex-husband called me with a hoarse voice and told me that things would be much better now that he didn't have a nagging wife or a disabled brother nearby. I mentioned to him that my brother-in-law wasn't really paralyzed and that he enjoyed life abroad. I also let him know that my mother-in-law was in debt. I blocked my ex-husband's number and we proceeded as strangers. A month later, I received a letter from my ex-husband full of complaints and apologies, along with an absurd proposal to remarry. I threw the letter in the trash. It seems that my ex-husband lost all his assets to pay off Sandra's debts, but it wasn't enough, they had to sell the family home regarding my mother-in-law. I desperately look for Renán, who has gone abroad. Life after the divorce has been uneventful for me, and I recently discovered that my mother-in-law declared bankruptcy. I no longer feel angry. Remembering the past, the counterattack that my brother-in-law and I carried out seems to have had an effect.